Hey, what is up guys? So last week I came out with a video about my top 5 favorite features of the iPad Pro. I've been using it as my main mobile computing device for a couple of months now, and honestly, I've been loving it. And what's especially great is that a lot of the things on the list apply not only to the iPad Pro, but pretty much any iPad. And if you haven't seen that video yet, I highly recommend you pause this video right now and watch that one first because I don't want you to get the wrong idea. So my experience with the iPad Pro has been, for the most part, great. And while I have enjoyed my time with it, nothing is perfect, and there were some things that I thought probably could be improved with the experience of using this as a mobile computing device. So here are my top 5 things that I wish I knew about the iPad before getting it. But before we get into that, make sure you smash that like button, and if you enjoy content like this, think about subscribing and hitting the notification bell just so you don't miss anything. I'm going to be posting every week about all things tech. And with that out of the way, let's get into the list. So number 1 is consistency. While iPad OS is great and gave the iPad some much needed features that turned it into a really capable device for productivity, a lot of those features only work some of the time. Or they work, but not in the way that you would expect. One of my favorite features of iPad OS is that you can have multiple instances of the same app open at the same time. For example, 2 different pages of notes or 2 different tabs in Safari, which is great, but the issue for me is that a lot of the apps just don't support this. Some apps, for example Amazon, pretty big, you might have heard of them, refuse to be anything less than full screen. Usually all you have to do to get split screen apps is just drag the app into one of the sides and it just does it automatically. But with Amazon, you can drag all you want, it just won't work. And when this happens, sometimes you can just drag the other app to the side and it'll make a kind of card that you can use on the side. But when both apps refuse to be less than full screen, you just have to choose between using one or using the other. You can't use both at the same time in any kind of capacity. And even apps that do fully support this feature don't really offer the level of control that you would probably expect. Like when you want to choose the proportions of 2 different apps' screen real estate while in multi-window mode, you're limited to increments of 25%, and there's no room for further adjustment. And it's not just with that one feature. Issues with consistency pop up all over the place when you've been using the iPad for a while. Like the new cursor does the whole snapping action on some things, but not others. You get desktop class browsing on Safari, but not Chrome. And I'm a Chrome user on the computer, so I have all of my passwords and stuff saved on there, and it just would have been really nice to be able to transfer that over to the iPad. I understand that being an early adopter of this form factor has its drawbacks, like dealing with issues of consistency, but it's just really frustrating to shell out this much money for something and still have these types of issues. Okay, so number 2 is app support, and I think that this one is kind of sad because I feel like one of Apple as an organization's greatest strengths is to use its size to pressure app developers to optimize everything for Apple devices. And I think this is especially prevalent for the iPhone. You can see that many apps, especially social media like Snapchat and Instagram, always offer updates for the iPhone first before offering them to Android. And even when Android gets them, they tend to be missing some features. I mean, not salty or anything, just saying. But with the iPad, you kind of lose that advantage because not that many people have an iPad compared to a laptop or a smartphone. And the result is that a lot of the apps just kind of suck on the iPad. Like most Google apps besides Gmail and YouTube are quite honestly frustrating to use. Google Drive has been such an essential part of my workflow for the past several years, and some of the features have been left out, and it feels like they're obvious omissions that really need to be addressed. So I'm a photographer on the side, and my preferred way of sending completed photos to clients is through Google Drive because I just found it to be the easiest way, and everybody knows how Google Drive works and has a Gmail account. But I'm not able to upload more than a single file at a time to Google Drive from the iPad, which is a problem because sometimes a shoot can have upwards of 100 photos that I need to send to the client, and uploading them one at a time is just not really feasible time-wise. So usually what I end up doing if I edit photos on the iPad is just transferring them over to an SD card and then just waiting until I have access to my desktop before I can start the upload. And there's just little stuff like Google Docs not showing page breaks and not allowing you to shift the bottom line where you're typing to the middle of the screen, so you end up having to stare at the bottom edge of the iPad the entire time you're typing. Adobe apps are just not the best yet on the iPad either. Lightroom and Photoshop exist on the iPad, and it looks like they're trying their best to make them work, but they're just not quite there yet. It's definitely worse on Photoshop than it is on Lightroom though. And a lot of the features on Photoshop just show a message saying this feature isn't supported on mobile devices yet. And it feels like they're really taking their time with getting these features onto the iPad, especially since they promised a lot of these features last year. And all of this just makes it feel like there's a bit of a disconnect when they market this device to pros, but all of these Hallmark programs are missing key features that pros definitely need and use. Okay, so number 3 is lack of ports. While I love USB-C and I'm so glad that this has USB-C and not a Lightning port, I wish there was at the very least an audio jack. While on smartphones I can understand why headphone jacks kinda had to go, they were just running out of space. But on a device this large, I feel like that excuse doesn't really hold up. Especially since this is marketed as a pro device, I think that it would have been good to include audio jack, because I know that a lot of people who produce music will probably need to connect a set of headphones to monitor what they're doing, and a Bluetooth set just might not cut it for them. And while you can just say, get a dongle, you'll be fine, since there's only one port, you'll have to choose between keeping the iPad charged or monitoring your work, which is something I feel like you really should not have to choose between. You could buy the Magic Keyboard, which has an extra charge port, but that's a $400 accessory, and not everyone will be willing or able to spend that much money on a keyboard accessory. So number 4 is battery life. This one is pretty simple. The battery life on the iPad Pro is good, but not great. Like, if all you're doing is going through Facebook or surfing the web, this battery will easily last you the whole day. But if you're really using it and editing photos or drawing or something like that, you'll end up having to plug this in well before the end of the day. Like I said though, it's really not bad, but I do find myself wanting for more battery life sometimes. Okay, last but certainly not least, number 5 is the price. Like, the price of this thing is just too high. The retail price of the 12.9 inch model starts at $1,000, and once you add in the Magic Keyboard and Apple Pencil, you're looking at around $1,500, which is absolutely nuts. And I bought most of these components separately, so I didn't really realize how much I had spent on everything until a little bit later. But once it finally dawned on me, my soul like hurt a little bit on the inside, because you can do a lot with $1,500, and a lot of people will find that price prohibitive. Am I glad that I have it and got the experience of the iPad system? Yes. But I also kind of wish I could have some of those dollars back. It's just really hard to compare the iPad Pro to anything else as well, because it's not really a laptop and it's kind of on a league of its own in the tablet space. But I will say that I really wish it was not quite as expensive. And I understand that, you know, you gotta pay to play, but come on, like, that is so expensive. And I can't tell you if this will be worth it to you either, because what's worth it to me may not be worth it to you. All I can do is give you the information, and then you can answer the question yourself on whether or not this device will fit into your life and if the cost is worth it to you. Okay, so that is my list for the top 5 things I wish I knew before getting the iPad Pro. I hope it was informative and gave you another perspective on the iPad. And as always, I try to be as unbiased as possible. I will say though that this list was way harder to make than the top 5 things I love about the iPad, which, by the way, if you haven't watched already, go do it. And it's because I've genuinely enjoyed my experience with the iPad. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, subscribe and hit the notification bell just so you don't miss anything. Also, smash that like button because it really does help a lot. And down in the comments below, let me know your thoughts on the iPad Pro. Are you thinking about getting one? Do you have any questions? Do you think I was fair in my list? I would love to hear from you guys. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate the support, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.